Hello, everybody. Today we are yet in another Treasury Guild Call, and this one is going to be special in a sense that we start a new process of accepting or budgeting for new proposals that are suggested by other community members or ambassadors. And yeah, one thing to mention that some agenda items are taken from Discord. And actually, that kind of reminded me, we do have one quick note to mention, and Peter just joined, is that the read.ai requires a license. And in previous ambassador work group, we understood that Peter is going to handle the this license cost. So if you are still having the same situation, then would be nice that if you could pull your license under the ambassador's email, and the cost will be around $50 per month.
Yeah, nothing changed there. Reluctantly, but I'll take the. Well, I guess something to touch on that would be how to reimburse for that, I guess, or how to like put the what to say. I guess the moment of payment would be also the moment of taking the AGIX value, and then
the way we would do is that's a good question. Where do we record it? But if we could just do a T-work task to quickly do that, or we have a template, Excel template that we every month export to the treasury manager, and we could do that together. And we are also, Fly has collected a lot of David, as the different licenses that we do need other than just that, and then we could create like a bundle template that we just update every month and pay out every month. And I would suggest that it would be then AGIX rewards plus 20% for taxes, or it depends what your taxes.
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, we will be fine. I'm not too worried, but let's I guess let's get a session in on that then for knowing the procedures, but not trying to capture the current meeting, just yeah.
Yeah, it's just you already mentioned there. Maybe.
Yeah, there's a certain urgency with the Read AI because can't archive at the moment because the summaries are locked. So so maybe if we could have some petty cash or something, or not, I don't know. It'd be good to pay it quickly so that we can start using the summaries, because otherwise I'm going to have a backlog of work.
I'll go looking for my credit card, but yes, sure.
Yeah, thanks.
So yep. Then on other stuff, I will just dive right into proposals. This is why we joined here today's Treasury Guild. So right now I have listed 5 proposals. One is Swarm Treasury System, the one which kind of ended. We haven't still agreed to continue or change that. Then T-work PBL and process modeling work group, as these are work groups to establish process guild. Then our high work group, this is a Stevens proposal, and then Dowlands also shared us a participation recognition pipeline proposal where they offer a development and the tooling cost. Is anybody also knows that there are other proposals out there which are missing that we should look into?
Well, I do have one which fits here, but also don't want to delay getting through this. Well, there's one. It's not a current proposal, but it's a request from Mindplex side if we could translate their content by the ambassadors, and they would like to have the rewards paid in AGIX for now, and then later reimburse those costs when their actual token is live. Because right now there's no live token. And yeah, I guess I'll need to put that in the proposal first, just so it's clear.
The Mindplex proposal, would the budget for the translation come from Mindplex or from Ambassador's program?
Well, it would come initially from the ambassador program, but once the token is live, they would reimburse that. That would be the approach. But yeah, since that's not a standard mode of operating, I do think it deserves a proposal, I guess. So I just wanted to throw it out there because I'm not entirely sure how to proceed with that.
I think this could be brought in like translator workshop. And this, because if it's in reimbursed, it's not really, it's basically like a free proposal. Although it...
Yes, but it would create a weird situation where we would be kind of paying for it initially and then getting it back later.
Yeah, okay. So this is indeed an interesting one, but good that you mentioned that now we have it in the agenda list. But okay, let's deal with that separately. And I think actually even asynchronously just starting to get these articles and translating is just fine because we do have enough tokens available. And if it doesn't track for months and months, like then...
Can you put a sticker against that, Thibaut, to remind us to do a possible process for commissioning on the Mindplex stuff? Because it's just something that we could think about. It's an opportunity to think about. But if we have, if we're commissioning work, that's how it could work. We do something and then we get reimbursed for it.
Okay, so let's now come back to these proposals then. And I think let's start with the archival workgroup because this is where the most work has been done in a sense, at least feels like it. And let's say, how do we get this accepted? Basically, last time I checked, it didn't have proposal budgets. Is this included in now?
Not figures, and that's part of really what I'm talking about here, or would like to talk about. And actually, there may not be much to talk about really, because really I need information or guidance to get started. And if you look back at your mirror board, or the fundamental question is what share comes from the ambassador contribution and what comes from how is other contributions paid for. So the other contributions would be other members of the work group or bounties and that kind of thing. And Felix very helpfully suggested some lines of the overall budget, which could be apportioned or maybe not spent, but kind of put aside, if you like, for the proposal. So it's just to know where I stand in order to budget for the next. Well, also the current status of the budget I would do is this 3-month cadence. So I've done that from April, but as I said last night, I don't expect to be paid retrospectively. It's just to get a picture of contribution, not cost necessarily. So April, we're talking about April, May, and June here. And that divides into 3 rough sections: April preparation, May setup and operation, and work group active in June when we start holding meetings. But I suppose there was talk about using some strategy money or some surplus. I'm not really sure. So some guidance would be good on this.
Thibaut, can you spin up the, I put a link here in the live chat as well on the sheet of the current ambassador's allocation. because the main problem right now, I think, is to figure out to which of these allocations do we address the budget request. And then yesterday, Grandano brought up as well that about a lot of budget for April actually was not paid out. So looking for from next month, from which percentage, from which bucket we want to take, and also say when we include April already, what we should definitely do. Then we can take retrospectively from several proper bodies as well. For example, Strategy Guild, as that didn't happen a lot.
The link you shared, I created a copy of that and made it simpler so that we could basically, one thought I had, we could have like this archival work group, and then we simply match the required sum from different budgets. But in order to do that, we would need to understand what is the total cost of a month.
Yeah, I mean, I can, again, I'm talking to the other members of the work group because I've been tracking my own contribution so far in setting things up, and that can give me a time estimate. I was kind of like distracted from that by the ambassador portion. So, you know, so I don't know. I would need, so I would take the ambassador. So that would start in May, does it? May the 1st, or I'm trying to work out monthly costs here, Thibaut. So it's like I can track my time every month, and that's just for me. But there's also that's the concept of time that gives me an estimate of the amount of time I spent on doing things. But then there's also you know, other people's contribution going forward. You know, so that will be like so is that what you need, Thibaut? Is that what you need? You need that as well to get a monthly estimate.
Yes, the cost that would, the total monthly average that you would need in order to fluidly make that archival workgroup functioning.
Right, okay.
But maybe if I share an example of one of my proposals,
yeah,
and
sure.
then we can come back to this, because I kind of thought it in a way that what is the monthly cost in a sense.
Yeah, I know. I suppose I'm getting distracted. I got distracted by the ambassador thing because, but I suppose that's irrelevant in a sense, because what I should be just doing is just tracking overall cost and then just see how that, then look at the budget later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it is distracting, because what can happen is when you're now part of an ambassador, so every work you do under archival, you will not receive these rewards. So what technically happens is that if you don't give to somebody else, then you should actually recost your working.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm working it out roughly in my head is started in April, not going to get paid for April because we're not paying for retrospective. Maybe being paid for an ambassador since the start of May. I'm not sure. That's what we need to conversate. So that will be any costs in May would be covered by the ambassador mostly, because we're halfway through May and most of the setup costs have been done by me. The work groups will start getting going. I'm starting to bring in Vanessa and Andre now. So we're looking at, so I need to meet with them to see the amount of commitments they're going to have going forward in the end of May and into June. But that won't be, yeah, so, yeah.
So where I see what can happen, and like, I think because as you can see, our budgeting is not that level that we can just decide and quickly know how it's gonna pan out. So a culture, or in a sense that feeling that I would hope is fine, is that when we create this budget, let's say 3,000 AGIX per month for archival work group, And then after a month is over, we will, if like T-work tasks are done and all are properly on the month of this May, for example, then we will be able to see, did we meet that threshold or if we went over budget. And if we went over budget, what happens then is you don't actually get more AGIX rewards, but only the gimbal rewards. But we can come back to start to now change these archival work groups, do we change it up or down based on the needs?
Yeah, if I can share my screen, I can show you. We are going to integrate in with DWork. Let me just see, get that up. Sorry. I mean, we're integrating it in from the GitHub side, so we'll have it'd be task-based. I stress task-based, not time-based. So, for example, if you take this one here, guidance notes for meeting facilitators, which Vanessa is going to work on, and that will be, we'll be able to take notes here on what has progressed, and this will be only recorded in terms of task points and a reference back to this GitHub record on DWork. Okay, so but the only thing that will be on DWork is task points, Tiva.
Yeah, but the task point still represents 1 hour, or it represents 1 task.
Well, yeah. Again, this is. I'll stop sharing. But it's. I don't have an answer to that because I know Vanessa, for example, she's not here. I can't speak for her, but she's quite resistant to the idea of an hourly rate, for example, because she's much more wants to see things in terms of you have a project cost, and that is for the contribution.
Yeah, but okay, we don't need an hour rate, but we still, if we want to measure everybody evenly, the only even thing we have is hour. So even if you give you do a 1 hour task and you reward it with $100, it's fine.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm just going to say that's going to be misleading, but yeah. I mean, I don't think the budget should be based on task points, is my view.
But it's not. It's
not, okay. So why are we doing task points then?
1 task point, 1 hour.
Then an hour is equal to a rate?
No.
Not forcefully. Hour is only able to define, let's say, for example, a spectrum or a threshold to say, okay, is the envisioned, let's say, whatnot done? Though the payments are not directly related to the task points or to the hours.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Can I interject?
Why are we recording the task points then?
To measure the time spent on specific skills, guilds, work groups, activities.
Right, okay.
Can I interject for a minute?
Yeah.
The other day you mentioned that this could be as high as $30,000 is the number that I remembered. And here we're wrestling a little bit about dollars again. There doesn't seem to be any debate about the quality of the work, the quality of what you guys do, the quality of the proposal, the effectiveness and what we need it for. That. So let's remove that per se. And it comes down to, again, and this is, I think, kind of what, when we started talking about ambassadors and retrospective pay, everybody's a little timid about asking what they're worth, to get compensated for. And I understand Vanessa's reluctance, but we're working within a system, and this is a new proposal that you guys put forth, and there's been reluctance to ask, from what I've noticed in the last couple of discussions and debates, what you guys think you're worth. I don't think that the ambassador cadres can absorb $30,000, which is why I suggested in a previous meeting, look at deep funding, and perhaps we can bootstrap this for a couple of months. April's in the past.
we're going to ignore that. I think you just agreed to that. So we have now May, when your ambassador compensation kicked in for you, and we have June, and then we have a quarterly review of the budget. So we're essentially talking 2 months to compensate you for it. Now, looking at the proposal, what I see is 2 hours of meeting. It says 3 people, but if I exclude you, since you have ambassador compensation, it's 2 hours of meeting for 2 people per month is what I'm getting. Is that correct, or is there more, Stephen?
No, and there's also a lot of assumptions you've just said, actually. What we actually said in that 30,000 figure was if this was a full blown proposal onto the Catalyst program, and it's not like that. This is
right. And I understand.
Hold on, Tommy. You know, so all I'm trying to work out here is process, not amounts. I'm not really concerned particularly about the payments here. What I'm concerned about is the clarity on process. And that is really, okay, how do you, if you have a new work group, not necessarily the archive work group, how do you apportion a budget stream for it? Okay, why do you need that? Because there's a kind of chicken and egg situation. You know, in order to get the project rolling, I need to know the amount of budget that is in principle is available, okay, in order to get going as well. The problem with the time-based paradigm, that is only just meetings. You know, how do I know if I'm going to get commitments of work from people? That work is just going to be, it's not going to be hourly based. It's going to be, say, can you do this task? For example, can you write these contribution guidelines for me by this date? And what can we pay for that will come from the budget stream. Okay, so then people will work to that measure. So what I need to know is, and we have a part of the answer here, is that part of the cost is going to be paid by the ambassador salary, if you like, every month. And then there will be a budget per work group. As per previous work groups, there seems to be a budget per work group. What is that amount? And that will give me something to work with.
Okay, so you're asking for a specific budget, a process for a specific budget for a new work group, and how do we establish that?
Yeah, once I have a price, so let's say for sake of argument, we apportion $1,000 a month budget for, yeah, just a complete random figure, okay? Then we wouldn't spend that amount. We would just know that that in principle is available, okay, above and beyond the salary for the ambassador. And of course, I wouldn't charge for my own work from that budget, but I would know that that budget's available so I can do planning.
So that raises a more interesting question. If we're budgeting, and Peter, you may need to weigh in here with your thoughts. If we're budgeting quarter to quarter, which is what we established a month or so ago, and we're going to review this in a quarter, and a new, and just talking process, not talking about this archive work group, but a new work group comes in and they're looking for a budget and we're mid-quarter, how do we handle that additional budget? We do have miscellaneous. We have strategy, which really isn't using any funds. We have Treasury. I don't know that you're really using any funds since everything's ambassador related. Other than you could roll the transaction fees, which is really Treasury, that 1%. You could roll that into Treasury, make it 4%. We have no one using currently organizers and outreach. Tooling, we never really set a budget, but now we're starting to look at this AI platform and other things. So how in a process, Tevo and Peter, in mid-quarter, a new work group comes in, irrespective of the archive work group, how do we allocate a budgetary column item for them? That's, I think, the question. Does that sound a better way to phrase it, Stephen, or a different
Yeah,
way?
I'm making my own assumptions as well, so this is up for debate, of course, but the assumptions I'm making is like, okay, it's a new project, so it needs to be, you can't just throw money at it. Okay, so what you would do is you would apportion a budget amount, which is like maybe a modest budget amount, so we say $1,000 or something. Okay, that's not on the principle that it's spent. It's an apportionment. It's not something to be drawn down. So then, and then at the end of some sort of review period, either a month or 3 months, the task contributions are reviewed, not in terms of hours, but in terms of what's been achieved. If what's been achieved ticks off, then the budget's paid. Okay, and then given how that payment is reconciled, it gives you some basis to project the next month or the next 3 months.
So you're asking for a different paradigm in compensation.
What I could offer is, how about we try that when we fit in this high work group as we have, then we call, now we have like a third method into it. We use roles, we use guilds, and then we use proposals. So everything is gonna be like percentage. So we put percent on our archival work group. And on the treasury side, we could also make it that as soon as we decide it, so we also have a roadmap. So this is May, and if new proposals come in, we budget them to the next month, and then we basically have like different proposals kicking in, kicking out, and we.
Yeah, I like that idea. But I mean, also, Tommy, as well, this is like an experiment. So what I'm trying to do here is to say, it's kind of to ensure us against certain types of work groups and proposals going forward. So let's say we have a more structured way of working. Okay. So, but that doesn't apply to every single activity, because sometimes with activity, it's more, a lot of this budget looks like you just set yourself a budget, then you're tracking activities and you're almost paying retrospectively. I'm talking about setting payments. Well, this is complicated by if you forget the ambassador's salary for a moment, but just setting a budget estimate in advance, which is modest, something to draw down, so whatever that figure is, and then to track contribution and then to match the two at the end of a period to see if they reconcile. Is that what you're thinking, Thibaut? Or because at the moment all I see is just some categories and some amounts assigned to those categories.
Mm-hmm.
There are no projects here, are there?
Well, the categories are more or less based on the work groups.
Yeah, exactly, Peter. I'm not saying the work groups are projects, but the thing is, that's it. There's no okay. What's the project timetable for each of those? Like, it's not.
Yeah, so the thing is, I think what is now changing is that guilds were basically continuous things. So there was no end date. So they're basically gonna happen. And now what happened was we're gonna introduce work groups that have a timeline. So we do something, we start budgeting them, but from Grandana, I see a good point, like what happens if budget is not used? Like, if on one sense, I would feel like both accumulating and collecting to MISC sounds good, but I would say that, for example, for guilds or like these things that are forever, they always collect to MISC. So our MISC will be then becoming like an innovation treasury, where we can start planning more proposals upfront or at the same time. But when it's down to proposals, then it's accumulating, because I always feel like at the initial glance, maybe there's so much work is getting done, and then the team themselves or the work group lead will then retrospectively pay based on what happened in the first month, and like the way kind of Swarm is.
Yeah, it could go both ways as well. So yeah, to be clear, this is not the same paradigm as the other groups. So this group, we're treating it like a project. So we're already into the second month of the project, April, May, June. Okay. So what I'd like is an apportionment for those 3 months. that's outside the ambassador's salary. So let's say that's $1,000 for the sake of argument. It could be any figure that is reasonably pitched. Then we would either exceed that budget or underspend the budget. Yeah. So, but at the end of that period, okay, which is like the end of June. Okay, and to answer Kandana's point, then you would either, that gives you the information about going forward. It gives you, say, okay, this is how much this is likely to cost, so let's then alter the next 3 months budget portion. Yeah. Now, if it's more, if we work more than, so we work more, then that's what we're saying there is not necessarily to say that we will be paid that, but that we're just discovering what we could be paid in the long term.
Well, some notes there. I think one thing that complicates it is that this budget we're looking at right now was established for the quarter, and now mid-quarter it gets edited or gets amended. I think the MISC category is perfect to provide there. At the same time, when you say modest budget, $1,000 would be double what we allocate to translations, for example, or to social media. So I'm not saying it's a ton of money, but it would be like 6-7% of our total monthly budget, which is, well,
no, same for quarter, not month.
Oh, fair.
Okay.
That's quite a difference. Sorry there.
Yeah. So
I basically accommodate and use MISC budget for that. Also, do want to note, slightly related, but Treasury Guild has an allocation here which does not cover the costs we're paying for Treasury System. And I think looking at this, the coverage that $800 per month is covered in this sheet. Just a side note. Sorry.
Actually, another question for you, Peter. Actually, would you prefer all work group planning to align with the your quarterly release? I mean, because I can adapt the planning for the archive work group, so it just aligns with quarterly releases.
Well, no, I'm quite fine with that not being aligned. As I said, that's why we have the MISC category as well, and we, as Crandano in chat also mentioned, there's a padded MISC with like, we do have some reserves, and I think your initiative is I think everybody would agree that it's a worthy effort, and therefore we could allocate funds to it, and then maybe starting the next quarter, we include it into the quarterly budgeting. That seems the simplest.
Yeah, it's almost like an exploratory budget. I mean, the $1,000 was just off the top of my head, by the way. So it's kind of like, but I was thinking of you take a 3-month period and then you assign a reasonable amount, let's say, and you recognize that we don't have the full information, okay, because we haven't started, it's only just been me who's setting up. A lot of that money is coming from the ambassador wage. And the other activities are not clear yet because they haven't got started from other people's contributions. But we don't actually spend that money. That money's only spent at the end when it's reconciled. So if we go to the end of June, we would say, okay, how above and beyond what the ambassador has done, what has Vanessa done, what has Andre done, or any other person.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because at the end of the month, we basically, if it's ambassadors engaging, the rewards will be totally different, and our Harvard work group budget may not be tapped if all our ambassadors. But I guess I think we are already feeling like aligned on rewarding, and yes, it sounds like confusing that we have fixed out quarterly already. But the question is then, if we decide today on a budget, we can also bypass, like we just make a voting or something, and that we don't wait for 2 weeks to make a decision go through.
I suppose sorry to interrupt, but I mean, from my perspective, it could be really simple. It could just say, what should the ambassadors or Treasury Guild apportion to the archival work group to the end of June? And you can discuss that, and if you come back to me with a figure, we'll work to that figure, and that's above the ambassador fee.
Okay, but then let's find the figure. Like you say, $1,000 would be 1 month required to make it.
No, I put again as a. I don't know. Is the direct answer? I would say, you know. So I mean, it's more it's certainly going to be comparable potentially to content creation.
Yeah, technically,
just think what's involved here. I mean, some of it's complicated by the fact that I'm getting paid for example, the backlog, which is a lot of work. I'm doing most of that work, but it's already paid for from the ambassador wage. Vanessa's probably going to come and do a lot of ongoing, like going forward archiving, and Vanessa will be doing a lot of like guidance documentation and stuff like that. Now, it's very hard to say in advance what that will be, as we see she essentially is going to pitch her work at what the treasury ambassadors can afford, really.
Yeah, but then let's do it. We have most of the stuff from archival work group is content creation. So how about we take 3% from content creation?
Tivo, 1 second before you remove anything, before you edit anything. I'm not convinced that we need to do any allocation at this point. If there is some work that was done that could be discussed and then compensated, but we don't need to do any, because I see these months until the reallocation that will be done in June, end of June. I see this as data. So we see the work and then we reward the work, but we don't need to do an allocation. There is no need for that. Like, for example, there is some work that has been done. Okay, that needs to be rewarded. Okay, that gives us some data. Okay, this month we rewarded this much. The next month was this much. And then when we're going to do the allocation in June, we have some data that will tell us, oh, maybe 5%, 6%, 10% is good. We don't know. But at this point, we don't need to change anything in that table.
This could feel weird to the proposer, because then you say, oh, okay, we do. And at the end of the next month, the ambassadors group will figure out what they allocate backwards to us. That's I'm not sure if this is really inviting.
Well, Stephen is an ambassador himself. I mean, because I see this as like, I don't like changing the rules as people go on doing things. Again, I don't want to be too strict, but in the same time, I don't see any problem here to fix. Like, okay, the proposal will say we need 10%. The proposal itself doesn't know how much allocation should be allocated. So
no, but Ro, there is. I hear what you're saying. I kind of agree with you. I don't. It's not about paying people now. It's about knowing what the participants in the project can reasonably expect. Okay.
Right, Stephen. You're right. And what we've done in the past, and I'll just simplify it because I think you're making this complicated. Number one, you haven't projected any dollar amount, and we've asked, and your proposal is there. What we've done in the past, for instance, since Rojo's talking, we gave a 3% or a 5% budget based on projections, but we left it up to him as work group head on how to pay, and we'll call them D-work tasks. So if you do a video, maybe it's $50. If you come and say, listen, I could use 3% for the next 2 months until we review the budget, and I will decide how to pay out the people in the work group based on their tasks or whatever. And I understand that it's an experiment, but it's your experiment. And we could wrap our head around that. But if you're asking for an open-ended budget, I don't think anybody is comfortable with
well, that's
that.
a misrepresentation. I'm not asking for an opening. I'm asking for the opposite.
Yes, exactly.
Right
now, what I'm saying is $600 enough? And then I would also like argue against Roger that we do need to change the numbers now so that everybody are on the same page of what they can expect out of being content creation from participating in a higher work group or participating in Treasury Guild.
Well, Tivo, you started with saying, okay, let's take from for example, you said, let's take from the content creator. As someone who's working on that, I would say, no, I don't want that. How do we resolve this?
I'm curious why we don't just take from miscellaneous just to simplify things for now.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And then because experimentally, if anything's unused, everything will roll to miscellaneous, and then we'll have data come end of June where we can kind of change the numbers if we need to or anything like that.
That's exactly my point. Let's keep it from miscellaneous, and then we figure out the numbers. Okay, this month was 5%, next month was 6%. We have an average of 5 to 6, and then we can have that allocation. But it doesn't make sense to have that allocation before we have data. And Stephen has kind of a similar opinion, I think.
You do have to have an allocation, but I do agree with you, Roger. Yeah, in principle. So I think we're all agreed here. In a sense, it's just I think Peter made the point that I would be strongly against. If you have a budget in total, you need to have some leeway in the budget. So you shouldn't spend 100% of the budget. And I agree. I think it's also been discussed that if things are unspent, there should be a kind of process where some of the unspent money is, or whatever, is going into a sort of miscellaneous pot, so that there's some float there. And yeah, I would agree. For your benefit, Tivo, we can then say, okay, let's apportion this amount per month or whatever, or per quarter, from miscellaneous to this work group. Okay, so that the work group have some idea of the potential funds available, not what will be spent, but the potential funds available. Yeah, so that's where we're at. Yeah.
So my thoughts on this, we went through in Strategy Guild for a month, 5 weeks or so, going over the budget and setting it. And the idea at the time was, these are the portions that are allocated. And if I recall correctly, our decision at the time was, if any extra budgetary needs are discovered throughout the quarter, it comes out of miscellaneous. Okay. And even for me, as I'm starting education, I had no intention of asking for a budget allocation in the middle of the quarter, because we had already decided that this was going to be set until June, and we rebalance. The way I understood it was that if any extra budgetary needs need to come out, you apply for it through miscellaneous. So, for instance, in education, if I decided that, oh, I think there should be something to be spent, my understanding was I would have to approach the group, say, hey, I'd like to take this out of miscellaneous during this quarter, and then we'd rebalance it coming up on the next corner.
Yeah, I think we are kind of complicating it a little bit, and it makes sense. Like, we don't have to see it as it takes a percentage away from miscellaneous. Miscellaneous is so stacked right now that you can do the 3%, 4%, 5%, whatever is decided today, or however we decide to vote on these things. You can put that percentage for archival group. The budget can be 103%, but realistically, by next month, we'll probably only spend like what, 30, or I guess with ambassador, like 60, 70% of our budget or something like that. So I think during this experimental phase, we don't have to worry about like taking percentages away from anything and adding them to anything else, if that makes sense. I mean, the miscellaneous fund, we got to realize it's stacked. Like, we can experiment a little bit. And
yeah, I agree with you, Trentano, and essentially it's a very simple answer I needed to help me with my own budgeting. So I know that there's a portion of my budget which can come from the ambassador salary, if you like. Now the other bit I don't know, because as Tommy says, that's sensitive to information, but also there's a kind of a cart and horse situation where I need to, people who are not getting paid from ambassador like Vanessa and others will need to know a rough idea of what funds will be available. Okay, in principle, so that
okay, and right now the rough amounts will be 2,500 AGIX per month until end of this, and then we come back and next month and see if we want to reallocate. But until then, and this is the budget we kind of start with. If that's fine, then we could move to the next proposal.
Yeah, but just one last thing there. Do you want to do that per month or per quarter?
That's per month.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be more? That's what I'm asking the group here, because this is also about generally in work groups. would you, if you have a new work group, would you want them to do the rolling estimate per month or per quarter?
Let's do right now per month, because it looks like we're gonna get busier, and if we can stagnate stuff, then we can do quarterly. But also it's very early, maybe, and we most likely need to start thinking and rebudgeting. And when people say we do it quarterly, it's basically a quarter is there, and then we can also come think of it to repopulate the MISC again if we're gonna have all the workgroups going on. We don't even know that. And now when people see this proposal process and figuring out as we go, there will maybe more ideas that comes through. So this may change quite often. And to be agile, we can, I think, do it monthly.
Then for moving forward, everybody agree that we allocate 4% to archival workgroup, taking this off from MISC budget, and just going per month and always revisiting.
The way how we can go about this is to create a poll on summon, and then we can attach to that poll a certain link to Discord, where we can even talk about this more if someone needs more details. And then one top for me, like two things have to be clear, which is what is the actual question in clear terms. Perhaps Stephen can make that. And the second thing is who should vote for this, which is something we haven't made clear so far. Like in the past, it was like whomever is in the room should vote, but perhaps we should talk about this at some point.
Yeah, in my mind, people with the ambassador role makes sense. Looking at the call, that's everybody, almost everybody.
It is okay if some people are not here because the vote will be outside of the call, so that's fine.
Okay, I just want to clarify this, if it could be typed into the chat so there's no guessing on what we're actually voting for. If you could phrase what you want to vote on and just type it in so there's no miscommunication. And again, I'm against
Do we need
rebalancing the
voting?
budget.
The question is anybody against giving 4% to archival workgroup from MISC?
The problem, Chivo, is that not everyone is here. That's one of the problems. Like we can all agree, but then it's not. Someone can come tomorrow and say, "Well, I didn't agree to that."
Then let's wait. Then that next
Chivo, that's a vote into itself. If you ask, does anybody disagree? That's a verbal vote. And being that it's Stephen's workshop, I'd hate to take a verbal vote because he's diametrically against them. So we need some other voting process if it's going to be a voting issue.
I'm actually not sure we don't even need to vote, because we say that we want to have this, and then we usually in Treasury we have been doing it 2 weeks then actually when it gets activated, but because we need archival workgroup now. And let's just give it until the ambassador Townhall. We also say that and let people know that this is happening, and every work group you guys are seeing, hey, you can mention that, hey, this is going to happen, and just talk to people, see if there is anybody against getting that archival work group budget.
A couple of things also, I mean, this also can apply to any work group, really, any new work group is, I mean, yes, I agree, Tommy, I do agree with secret ballots, but, and I would, in the kind of medium term, I'd agree that everything like budgetary should ultimately be voted for. But I think it'd be enough information for us just to know a decision in principle. So it could be asynchronous. You don't, if people aren't here to have a final decision, then you could do that outside the meeting. You just set a deadline, you say, here's a decision. Can people vote on this or say yay or nay on this by this date? But from our perspective, from the archival workgroup perspective, as long as we know that we have that figure in principle, then we can start planning.
Okay, right now I will say that in principle you don't have that figure, but over to the next week we will feel other people who were not in the call, who check this recording or the meeting summaries, they can have a say and give their own opinion. But because we have 9 minutes left, I would also take another call and see if we can move more fees around and have like a bit harder decision be made by ambassadors and the team around ambassadors. And it was already mentioned this farm treasury manager system. So previously, the way we did it was that we had like an $800 per month plus 1% for each transaction. But if the price drops below 3.35 cents, which is basically right now, I don't know how many percent it is, then the USD per month will also reduce by that amount. And that would mean, would everybody be fine with whatever the cost will be from here, or do we need to kind of also reallocate? Trying to think now, how do I calculate this 100% from here?
Oh, are you saying like 11 of 35? Since it's 35 minus 11, you do 11 over 35. Use that percent. Yeah.
So around $550 for 1 month. And Treasury Guild would need also another percent in that sense. And do we take it from risk?
Well, I guess that's a necessity, right? Not really a conversation.
So I'm just trying to look at this as a bigger picture here. And it's not about our tribal work group budget. It's about the budget as a whole going through the quarter. Okay. So we balanced the budget when we balanced it, and we said it was going to stay that way throughout the quarter, and miscellaneous was there to take care of any overlap. If we keep doing this, because and I'm not, again, I said this earlier, I'm not planning on asking for any budget for education, but if I had, and then all of a sudden we need 4% for education, and then if another work group pops up, that's all of a sudden 3 new groups in the middle of a quarter. We could spend so much time trying to understand how to budget for different groups, when I think we set up the miscellaneous budget to take care of the overlap, and it can be distributed through there without setting up a new process mid-quarter. Does that make sense?
I think that is what is happening right now, because we could be like, well, organizers outreach, we're not using that, so let's just use percentages from that. But just for simplicity's sake, in the first 3 experimental months, it's just like, okay, we can imagine it like we take a percentage out of miscellaneous. But realistically, by next month, there's going to be a large chunk of budget that's not even utilized, and it's all going to roll over to miscellaneous. And it's probably going to be more than 10% this month going to miscellaneous, no matter what. So
Yeah,
I think that is happening already to an extent. And it is kind of confusing how we're doing it, because on paper, we don't even have to imagine that percentages are being taken away from miscellaneous. How I imagine it is, we have a really stacked miscellaneous fund, and we're looking to experiment. And come July, we can make more sense of the budget.
So I look at it differently. Portions of the budget are going to this conversation because we're all getting paid for the last 30, 40 minutes of talking about it. When in reality, and for me, in simplicity's sake, if Stephen needs, let's say, 1,500 AGIX, he could just say, hey, I need 1,500 AGIX for this archival group project, and we could just up, down, vote it. And it would take less time in my head than going through and figuring out what to.
Well, I think that is happening. It's whether you want to, like on the piece of paper that Tevo is using, I feel like that's how he's working it out in his head. And then in my mind, it is like, well, we need 2,500 AGIX per month, which comes down to 4% of the budget if you want to think about it in those terms. But then the reality is going to be that miscellaneous, likely, if you look at the numbers this month from last month to next month, is going to be well over the 10% that the budget was already at. But I get your point too. I mean, we can look at it like, okay, well, 2,500 AGIX a month until we review the budget again. We could look at it like that, or people could say, well, it's 4% of the budget. But either way, I think by the time we look in July, I think whether a person has it on their paper one way or the other, it comes out to the same thing. It just feels more complicated than it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that quite a lot. At the same time, for a new initiative, if you're saying like, well, you're getting 4% of a token budget, which has a varying token price, then that also doesn't give quite a, I mean, it gives some indication, but it can be very variable what the actual output will be. So it could be like $1,000 or it could be like $300, and that's not optimal. So in a way, I'd like to put it in tokens rather than in percentage, I guess.
Tokens, well, that's an interesting point, Peter. Would the tokens reflect contribution then, or no, rather than a currency value?
Tokens is the collateral that you know that you have to spend. Percent is to just make sure that we are aligned, that if we run at full capacity, then we are able to sustain ourselves. And if we keep doing it like this way, then we basically just make sure that we don't over budget ourselves, and we kind of build ourselves the infrastructure that we need. And over time, we probably will understand how that's we basically do more tooling on the way we're working. Then we have this roadmap. Okay, this month we have allocation here. Next month it automatically jumps, the percentage will change. And that's a great point what Cardano made. Technically right now we are using this MISC because we thought ahead, and we don't have to have that much of discussions. As long as we agree with the proposal, we can take it easily from MISC. If this is running out, then these quarterly meetings which coming up, these are places where we discuss that, do we now start to cap proposals, or when this proposal ends, then does it go back to MISC, or we start reducing other stages from ambassadors or content creators or wherever to leverage up MISC if we assume that we are going to have more proposals or things that we need to reallocate from. Two more, okay, actually there were 4 more proposals. Okay, 3 more proposals. So today we talked about Swarm Treasury and proposal archival. We have, I think, one quick one. We can, actually I wanted to do this keyword too. So I will quickly show what's happening. Yeah, I guess we're gonna go over time. Quick question, does anybody have to hop off?
I do have a hard stop, but don't let that stop the conversation.
Me in half an hour from now.
Okay, so if we don't do it now, then the process modeling and TVRP bill will be delayed. But alternatively, there are, if I bring this on right now, then process modeling will be this session which we basically had last process guild. But instead of sometimes skipping these overviews, we have these process meetings in a separate forum. And the idea was that it's going to have like around 2 months to have this. Of course, if I just do it 1 month like we did here, everything is basically like reduced by 2 of amount 2. And mainly what it consists is meeting preparation, meeting itself, a 1-hour meeting and summary with a video upload, and also gives 2 hours per week to room for async documentation in case something needs to be done. And that would amount to, let's say this is 480, so it's $240 per month. If you're quick, we could take it from process guild because that has that budget. Any thoughts of here?
Since the process guild has that available fund, and it's not being used, then I guess we can look at it as miscellaneous again. So we're actually taking it from miscellaneous, right? So anyway, tomato, we're taking it from the budget that is not used, basically.
Okay, now as a future process or current process, as new work groups start up, are we going to go through this rather convoluted and complex discussion process and debate for each working group? Or are we going to simplify it and say, hey, just ask for a budget and we either approve it or we don't? Because we're spending a lot of time. This is the third meeting we've had on this. And I find it too complex.
I'm always down personally to have incubation be a spot where people can bring ideas if they want to hash it out with people. And that's not like, if that seems like it takes too much time, people don't have to join for that or anything, but that's a good spot to like hash things out. I agree we need some sort of simplified process, but seems to be what we're working on. But each proposal is going to be a little bit different for a while, it seems.
Well, yes, and we're going back against our agreement when we set this budget. We're redoing the budget in the middle of a quarter. And fundamentally, I have an issue with that because then you just keep on doing things and discussing it, and we get back to budget and we get back to money. We had set this a month or so ago, and we agreed we were going to review it on a quarterly basis. And now, as we're sitting here, TiVo is redoing the budget. And that's what I thought we had agreed we would not do.
The issue is that I wasn't able to understand, can I just start the work group? Even if I have process guild rewards, there was no understanding that, yes, go use it. Right now, I got pretty quick, like in 3 minutes, said, yeah, sure, if you take it from process guild, then it's fine by me. And then that kind of fixed it. And we could move to the next one, although you say it's way too complex, but I guess the complex part is if it's, yeah, like it's a new one, like a new proposal that is totally out of the usual process.
I think TiVo, the way how you're thinking is fine. The only problem is like the visual effect of this Excel sheet that we're looking at is that you're doing a new accounting model of this quarter, which is not the case. I understand what you're doing. You're saying that in process guild, this 2% or whatever is not being used. So I'm putting it into use into this other need that we have. And that's fine. But the way how you label it seems like you're doing the accounting, or I mean, you're doing the budget basically in another way.
Exactly. It's confusing people. I mean, and it's how your mind's looking at it. And then it's kind of like it feels like there's two different ways to look at it. How I'm looking at it, all the percentages stay the same. The budget that was agreed upon stays exactly the same. We've got a padded miscellaneous, use those funds until July. And then in July, these percentages can change on the sheet because that's what miscellaneous is for. And I think that's where we're all agreeing on it, but we're looking at it like two different ways. Because Tevo, how you're doing it, you're kind of augmenting things, and this is what you would bring in July, like what you found could work to pull from, things like that. And yeah, it's just, I think we have like two different views on how we're looking at this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. Also say that, the data side of it applies to everyone. Okay, so let's say you agreed a budget absolutely for 3 months, as you say, Tommy, and you're just not spending it. So you could wait until the end of the 3 months and say, okay, you haven't spent that, and only make a decision at the end of the 3 months to reapportion it to somewhere else. So I suppose that's what is an issue here.
Not really, because the budget that you're not using every month goes directly to miscellaneous. So it can be used the next month. If you don't use it this month, next month someone can use it for miscellaneous.
Yeah, but how is the information for why you didn't spend it captured?
Yeah, that is a good point actually. So directly it is not reported, so it should be collected, I guess.
Yeah, because
Because
that would help
Stephen
with
also,
estimates.
Stephen, when we set up the percentage, it was not totally set in stone how exactly this percentage will be used for exactly which work. This is up each work group which has to figure out. That's also why it's that loose right now and not really clear, right? From my perspective, also really agree to Grandano actually on the percentage sheet. Nothing changed. So the only thing we try to figure out right now is how we use the budget, because the sheet doesn't tell anything with the percentages, how these percentages are actually used and put forward the individuals then, for example, right?
I would prefer, and I think it's simpler and it's within existing practices, if Stephen, as an ambassador, would go into D work and create a D work if 600 is what he believes he needs, create a D work for 600. And that's simple. And it stays within it, and created out of miscellaneous is what we had agreed from day one. And see if you utilize the 600. And it's the end of the debate, because as an ambassador, that's your prerogative to set up the D-Works and go from there. I think that's very simple. We're all in agreement, Stephen. We want to fund it. We're fighting and debating and arguing too much on budget, and we're spending too much time on it.
Yeah, Tommy,
So
this is not about funds, it's about process.
Yeah, no, I know the process. The process had been agreed at the beginning of the budget, and that's why we had the miscellaneous and we have the D work. So if you just threw a process for this new work group, set up a D work, it follows the process that was agreed on. And then we're not.
If you paid attention to the presentation, I am doing that. I'm setting up D work tasks that are related to the tasks that we're doing. All I want is the apportionment, which we've agreed. So we've agreed the apportionment. So there's nothing more to say, is there?
Can we move to the next proposal?
Mm-hmm.
So now a more complicated one. So this I call T-work PBL work group. So it's a more, and I have actually even requirements in this one. So from Governance Guild, a different group, basically some members are also in here. I need 4 people who are part of this T-work PBL group, because it has some homework to do, which are like around up to 8-hour like tasks, almost like every week, that will be then rewarded for around $80. And these are like basically written guides on Canvas. It may actually change where this PBL, but basically PBL is a project-based learning. And if you look at there, right now, if we assume we're gonna use Canvas, it then looks like this, that you have like these modules, people go in, they can basically read stuff that is like also like questionnaires and stuff we can build up, but mainly it's meant to be like a learning guide. Here is like an opening, what is this module about? And the focus here is the D-work stuff. And then we're gonna work on questions like how to create spaces, how to create tasks, basic principles, describe account. And these we actually already kind of have. So there may be like less cost to kind of figure that out, and just important to aggregate the information and make it into text files. But when we go into specializing like activity list method, meeting recordings, project method, our PBL tasks, or the integration like guides, how to work with the Treasury Guild and T-work together. Like these are things which we haven't really written down yet. So all of that will be like, we create ourselves guiding material, but in that, what we also included here is that to start a new test where we do a multi-purpose funding. So SingularityNet will also reward it. I will need around $1,000 of reward to do that. It's a 2 months, so it's actually, again, let's say $550 per month. But Governance Guild will also match these rewards with up to $1,000. So all of these rewards actually get double the incentive. So if the task is like, so basically you get double the amount for that 1 hour of work, but from 2 different
I couldn't understand.
entities.
What was the last scheme, reward scheme about? Can you explain that perhaps?
So everything you do will be rewarded by Singularity Net and doubled by Governance Guild. So basically, if you do a task which is $10 task under like a guide, and let's say the guide, total guide, and you report 8 hours to create the guide, you will get $80 plus $80 from Governance Guild.
What is Governance Guild? Is that through Ambassador Program or?
That's a Project Catalyst funded proposal. And another entity with basically a lot of SWAR members are there, basically all are SWAR members. And they are like another entity that is working on helping governance and like communities.
So it's part funded by Catalyst, and then you're looking for like partial funding through Ambassador Program?
Yeah,
or...
because we are looking for key work, like we are actually looking project management, project-based learning material, and Singularity is in need of like teamwork management, because we heavily use that, and it would be nice to just not have training sessions, but also have a training session guided with like documentation that you can later look up, or if you're a more self-manageable person, you can actually read through all the ways the community is working together and have these guides.
So TiVo, if I understood correctly, so what you're searching for, besides the budget part, which we will get into, just to understand how it works. So you're also searching for manpower, or like human power, basically.
Yes.
Or is that already figured out?
No, this is not figured out. Right now I have only myself here, but in order for this process to start, I would also need up to like 4 people in the, including me.
So we can actually utilize our work groups in that, or should it be like 100% involved individuals, or like can we create tasks in our corresponding work groups for this project? Is that possible?
Whoever wants to be part of this work group, but the goal is that it minimum requires 4 people every time.
Are there...
I understand that, but what I'm actually asking about is that the level of involvement for the person, not just for example, you need 4 people, but okay, you need these 4 people to put in, let's say, 5 hours a week.
At least 3 hours per week. Okay, 1 hour for weekly meeting. I would most likely do the prep and summaries, unless somebody else wants to take it over. But if we say that 8 hours is 1 page, and we have like 3, 4, like around 10 pages, and if we do like 2 pages per week, we will be able to get done in like 2 months. So if 4 people, everybody does something, then let's say 5 hours per person per week.
I see. All right, I'll forward that. Okay.
What was the proposal funded for, and then how many people are currently involved, and what's their rate if there are people already involved?
Right now, this is a proposal. Only I am involved to kind of pitch it to you to see who is interested, and I have no clue who is interested in it.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
Yeah, I helped draft the proposal in Catalyst. You know, I dropped a link, Cardano, although I didn't.
You mean Governance Guild?
Yeah, well, I think if you're talking here about Governance Guild Call's proposal, okay, which is where some of the initial budget for Governance Guild came from, including part funding for the PBL, which was totally funded for $37,600, but of course not all of that is going into PBL development. Again, hourly rates. Okay, no, that's not how it works. It works in terms of contribution, because if it worked in terms of hourly rates, you couldn't afford anyone because it's such a low budget. but what really was happening in Cardano was it was part of the funding. I think if you go to the budget section down to, if you scroll down, I've only just opened this up. There was a budget for PPL creation. I can't remember what that amount is now. It's something like $12,800 or something. Some of that has already been done. I think what TiVo is proposing, correct me if I'm wrong, TiVo, is to use a part of that work in collaboration with SingularityNet for match funding in order to assist with DWork training. That's what it is. That clearer?
Yeah, you are correct. And but yeah, how we go about this? We can take 4% from NISC, and then we basically have budget to do this. And I think then it's up to to gather these people. I'm not even sure how to how to approach this. Do we just
Tivo, okay, I would like us perhaps to avoid taking anything from anywhere. Let's discuss more perhaps how much is needed.
4% from NISC, that would then cover the monthly cost of TiVo PBL.
No, besides the percentage, like the fixed amount. I guess it's in dollars. You said it before, but I didn't catch it.
Around $500 per month.
$500. So that I guess 2,000 AGIX around.
It might help my mind wrap around it. What's been done with the PBL already? I know you said $12,800 funding for the PBL so far. So I'm just wondering, like, what's been done so far, and then that way I can see where like this puzzle piece fits, how it works in the ambassador program, and pulling people from here to work on it.
Right now, there is this. What is this model about? Tools you need to account for the related to DWork, and what is needed to be done is all these questions, building background knowledge, these basic things about DWork, and some specializing information we use in SingularityNet already, and finish it up with how else we could contribute, what else we could add, and that will be then it.
Are those the pieces that like the ambassadors would be working on?
Yes, or so whoever wants to be part of.
So what's been done with the PBL so far, like outside of what the ambassador expectation is?
Has there been any reporting, TiVo?
What?
For the proposals? So maybe that, or well, you could show Canvas, or you could show a report from Catalyst, maybe.
So in regards of PBLs, for now we have treasury management. This is basically information how to set up and what kind of wallets to use, and all of like information how to start your own treasury guild, basically, which we already started here. So this is something we already have. Then there is also this decentralized decision-making models coming up. Right now, this is not in Canvas, it's more in documentation, and throughout different time periods in SingularityNet Ambassador program, I have been using some decision-making models and testing it out in our workshops. And for and that would be basically it. But we do have commissioning thing planned, and now this DWork stuff planned. And of course, in general, also governance Guild is now planning governance meetings and series of events.
Chief, I would like to ask about something. So for us, the Treasury Guild is already done, so it's not really relevant, is it? And I would say even DWork, we kind of have it figured out. to a certain point. So what you can help me think of right now is what is the added value of this project? And I don't mean to be harsh, but it's just what I'm thinking about right now. What is the added value, let's say, for existing members of the ambassador program or coming members, like new members?
I'll respond to this, Tivo.
Sure.
Because when you look on Governance Guild, this is Andrea and Miroslav, who are also part of the Treasury Guild here in SingularityNet. It's Vanessa and Stephen. It's Tui, Tivo. I am also a partner. Was a partner. Not much supporter from outside. And some other people as well. And what the benefit is that you have a bunch of people who are already engaged here, just putting all the knowledge together now on an open platform where everybody can use the PBLs to set up their own stuff. For example, with the Treasury Guild right now, we introduced the whole stuff already to Singularity and to Ambassador's program, though it's still run by Treasury Guild. You can't run it yourself, and you don't have a step-by-step guide how to do it yourself. Exactly for the DWORK, for example. Swarm set up the DWORK and all the stuff, but we don't have this really easy pipeline. Let's say, for example, a new work group comes up and says, oh, okay, we want to spin up this, tick, how to make decisions or whatnot. We have then already a full library of a bunch of very related stuff, which we can directly pull in as educational material into Ambassador's program. This would be mostly my take on it.
Yeah, there's another perspective which may be because of the way you presented it, Tivo. With respect, you presented it very much like a proposal, but there's also a kind of opportunity here because when I was in Governance Guild meetings, the kind of thinking there was, what would co-working with another project look like? And this also goes for Ambassador Guild, by the way. Okay, so let's imagine that you have someone approaching us and they want to work with you for match funding. Okay, so this is not just about Ambassador Guild asking Governance Guild questions, this is about Governance Guild asking Ambassador Guild questions. Is Ambassador Guild ready for match funding? If you're not, then maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Okay, if you are, then let's talk about a collaborative project using match funding. What does match funding mean? It means that we have come up with this budget for creating PBLs or whatever. I know that whatever that amount was, we want to match it with something from the SingularityNet Ambassador's budget. And are you right, Kandana? We need to sort of say, be clear about, okay, well, what is the value there? Okay, and there's a couple of things where there's the value of, you know, can we use these PBL workgroup material? Is it useful to the Ambassador's program? That's a valid question. Okay, so maybe we need to ascertain that, and that would be good if you could review the materials or something, Pradana. Maybe we need to set that up. And then the other thing would be, how do we make that work? You know, how do we make match funding work? So, do you see it that way as well, Felix? I'm not sure.
Yeah, just to throw out, like, from like a total outsider, like yeah, you make sense. Like, how would you work with somebody's project? And then as a total outsider, like how it starts, it's kind of like my thinking, or how it sounds is like, well, a project was funded $12,800. There's things needing done. We need 4 people, and more funds are needed from the ambassador program. Those funds will then be matched through this budget. And then my thinking is there's probably going to be like partnerships where it's like, well, it's none of my business what's been done yet, you know, because it's, you know, this is kind of an offer. It kind of benefits some ambassadors to work on it. But then there's also the side of me that's like, okay, well, if this project was at X amount of budget, I wonder what percentage of the work is done, and then what percentage of the work will be done by these 4 people. And does that work in the spectrum of $780 out of the $12,800?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to be. We need. I suppose that's what we're discussing now, isn't it? We're trying to work out because there are tracking and contribution, transparency, and accountability issues. Okay, so if you're doing a joint project with another completely different project, which Governance Guild in a sense is funded from a different funding stream, and then, you know, here both need to be, there's a trust issue between 2 parties, isn't there? They both need to know who's contributing what for what amount. That's what we're getting at.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I could see like projects in the future where it's like, well, it's kind of like none of my business what the project's working on. But I also come from like my mind in the crypto space is like open source and transparency, but not everybody's like that, because you might have somebody that's more business minded. They're working on a piece of the pie that's like proprietary or something like that. And maybe in the future, it's like, well, we don't have to know what that is, right?
Thibaut's gone.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask about, like, since there is a matching to be made from the side of the ambassador program, there is also something that brings to my attention is, well, if ambassadors work on this, well, ambassadors are not supposed to double it, right? So then if ambassadors again are going to work on this, then there is no need for a matching because they don't get to double dip. So perhaps that.
Yeah, in this case, my assumption is that this does not count into double dipping. So they will not get their own part of singularity net rewards, but they will get the extra $10 matching from governance.
I see. So if 4 ambassadors join, so there is no need for matching.
If they're
No.
getting paid twice for the same project, isn't that double dipping?
But not from singularity net.
Yeah, so Tiva, again, it's not clear for me. So if ambassadors work on this project, then they're not getting rewarded from the ambassador program. Therefore, they're going to only be rewarded from the governance guild side. Therefore,
Yes,
there is no need for a matching.
See, because maybe not all of the 4 people are ambassadors.
No, I'm assuming the 4 are ambassadors. That's the assumption.
Okay. I'm not sure if this even should be a goal, maybe.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I think
of
idea
course.
here is as well to onboard new people. So
Yeah,
not
I mean,
sure
we
if
don't
this
have time
assumption.
for it. We don't have time for it anyway. But yeah, it's like, but yeah, I just wanted to make a sense of the proposal.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing thinking about it in that realm, because you know they're coming to us as an ambassador group to discuss it, and then on one side you can think, well, we can't double dip, and then on the other side, if they approach us outside of the ambassador program, want to match us with these funds. But yeah, I guess you're right. If there's 780 coming from the ambassador program, that obviously shouldn't be coming to people that are already being rewarded for being ambassadors, as we discussed.
It's an interesting quandary, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
And then yeah, do you understand, like, I'm not like skeptical, and I trust you guys. It's just if somebody comes with a proposal like this, I'm thinking, okay, DWork PBL, like, it's, well,
No, Cardano, this is gold. This is gold. I mean, I think it's really good because this is exactly, this is like a test case, as I said.
Yeah.
So
It's
you should be
like,
asking. You should be asking these questions. Absolutely.
nice, man. Yeah, it's like DWork PBL, 5%'s done, 95% to be done. Well, what percent is the DWork PBL to the overall PBL? I'm just trying to wrap my head around, like, how, if I find out like this is 40% of the whole PBL or something, then I'd be a little skeptical that there's only going to be $1,000 to match it, right?
So Thibaut,
but I don't have this info.
Can I ask Thibaut, the total budget that was apportioned to the DWork PBL, what was that from the Catalyst side?
There was no plan, like, because we just do. If this is not gonna happen here, we may probably not gonna do this DWork PBL at all.
But surely Governance Guild apportioned a budget for the DWork PBL?
No. But
Is it
at average, we could say that we have 4 different PBLs. So if we take this as a 4th one, it's like $2,500.
Just to give some insights on the proposal. The proposal was submitted, I think it was Fund 9. So this was in June last year. And we set the general budget for PBL learning materials and DWork bounty incentives. Though in the PBL learning materials, we didn't set how many of the rewards we directly want to add only to the PBL or to the commissioning or to the decision-making PBLs.
But I also want to add a comment. I mean, whatever I said before, that was just me trying to understand. I totally love the project. I don't know if this is part of what Gimbal Lab is doing, but I like that, and I think it's a good way to onboard people into a better learning experience. The way how we have it now is that well, you either have to explain to people in the chat or you have to push them to figure it out themselves, and I don't think that's ideal. I think using Canva is a really good method. I mean, it comes from the education side. I like that, but again, I'm just trying to understand how this whole thing will work.
Yeah, because my mind's gonna work with numbers on this type of stuff, and it's like, you know, 4 ambassadors are utilized at $1,000, and then I later find out that that's, you know, 40% of the PBL, which was allocated $12,800, and be like, well, that was kind of undersold, right? Or, you know, my thinking is always going to be like, is this a fair cut to the ambassador program? That's always going to be how I approach these types of things.
Yeah, I think to be fair to Governors Guild, also Governors Guild are trying to, and by the way, Governors Guild is quite a broad collaboration of people, including Gimbal Labs, QEDAO, and Nori is from Pacific Townhall. It's quite a lot of different people involved, you know, and they kind of come together under that proposal as a kind of form a kind of decentralized consultancy group, if you like, yeah, but also to use that relationship with Gimbal Labs. And why I use Gimbal Labs? Because, well, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Gimbal Labs, but they are working on a educational platform which they want to tokenize at some point. So that's why the Governance Guild just sort of are coming to the end of its proposal in a way. They've done a lot of work on producing project-based learning materials, and they just will have a float at the end of it. And there was a discussion going on about where can we go from here? You know, what can we? And one of the ideas, which I think is part of the reason why Governance Guild was set up in the first place, was, well, we want to collaborate with new people. So there is that, but I see where you're coming from. This is why this is really interesting conversation, because it's about who knows. If you don't know people, then what is being offered, you know? So you have to sort of put that on the table to see what is being offered, and then, you know, see how the work is shared and how the payment is shared as well from different funds.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, the only reason I'm digging is just like, this is going to be expectation when anybody comes with any type of proposal, because it probably is pretty complex to think about. Like Tebo said, like DWork PBL would be 110%. It's like, well, that's good to know. And I'd like to see like a bit of transparency on why that is, you know, because like I said, while I trust you guys, I'm coming at this from, if an outsider brought in the proposal, people that I don't know at all. If I found out a budget was allocated, and then it seems like in the future, you know, maybe it's like, oh, well, 3,000 or 4,000, you know, % of the budget is actually this DWork PBL or something like that, then I'd be like, oh, well, I got undersold. I don't think that's what's happening here, obviously, because I know you guys, but it's just,
Felix had to drop off.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think Ro brought up a pertinent point. It's like, what value is this at? Maybe that's the first question. So does Singularity Net Ambassadors Program need a PB or could benefit a PBL on DWork? That's the first question, I suppose. And because Ro, I think you suggested, well, is that useful? You know, do you need it?
yeah, it could. I guess I would have to see like the other PBL modules and kind of like what it's going for to make my own mind up on that. I think it would be. And then, you know, like part of my thinking is also like, well, are we going to keep using DWork into the future? It seems to lack certain things. Yeah, I'm just one mind in this, right? Like,
yeah, I agree. And also I'm trying to figure out in my own head as well, Quintana, because there's also the project-based learning materials, but there's all are workshops intended or working meetings intended, Tiva, as well.
For this DWork PBL, yes, there are every week 1 hour meeting.
I wanted to deviate a little bit from where the conversation is going, and I want to be a little bit selfish and then ask about the video side of PBL. Tivo, perhaps you have like a vision about this, like what type of video content, and perhaps if you can give some numbers, that would be nice as well, like that is projected to be made.
You mean in Tiber PBL?
Yep.
No, I'm actually didn't think about videos at all.
So
Like,
it was
to me, it's
purely
just
text.
you spend 8 hours up maximum on each of these questions, and whatever you can do with these 8 hours is what is going to be the output. Of course, governance guild will look at it and see if it's needed. Some do expect some videos too.
I was thinking more like if you're gonna showcase the use of some tools, as you said, or something, that perhaps like having videos alongside it would be something nice to have. But again, I don't know.
Yeah, other PBLs, for example, Treasury one has a video related to everything, and there are like a bunch of videos how to set up different wallets, and so video is a good thing in as an education material for sure. But
I mean, the way how I see this is like, okay, I like it. I see potential of a lot of tasks to be made in the video workgroup, so I like the idea, especially that it's, again, it's double. What would you call it? Double rewarded, I guess. So that would be nice for the people in the workgroup.
I suppose from governance guild perspective, Rojo, is what videos would you be producing and what would they cost? So, and you know, how would that fit into the project-based learning materials? I agree with you that you could add video content into a project-based learning material, but then I suppose it's a question of what would that look like from a project-based, you know, so you go to, you know, is it some sort of exposition or something, or recording or something?
But to be honest, I have to look at the content and the vision itself. Like if there is some sort of a skeleton of an idea, that would be nice to have. And again, this would need like a brainstorming. I mean, we can talk about it in the video work group and then say like brainstorm and then go like, okay, maybe we should have these kind of videos. Who is up to doing this? And then we can create a task for it, I think. And that would be my part of helping the project go through and succeed, basically.
All right, let me conclude the session and then let's give it a rest and meet us in newer call today. I'm gonna start sharing the screen. And today we will be able to go through different proposals. We had the archival work group figured out. We allocate 2,500 AGIX from MISC to that proposal, so we can get the archival work group going and get our data corrected as it's needed. And we also discussed what happens if the budget is not used. And for now, 2 different ideas were proposed, which we basically going through is that everything which is in process guild or budgeted in roles, they will be moved to MISC, every unused rewards, and it will be cumulating rewards for proposals. For example, if archival workgroup does not spend 2,500 AGIX in this fund, he will have opportunity to spend this amount that was left over from this month and plus with the new month rewards. Then we looked at the Swarm Treasury System, and we adjusted the price based on percent direction down. So we agreed that we are going to continue using Swarm Treasury System. So the price was around $500, which means the 1% was taken from MISC to Treasury Guild in order to cover that cost. Then we looked at the T-Work PBL work group, and this proposal did not pass, and there will be future meetings to discuss how could we further implement that, or if we need it at all. But for process modeling group, it was much easier to get it started. The budget will come from Process Guild and will be allocated to process modeling workgroup. And most likely the workshop will start from next week. And then final proposal we didn't get to look was Starlens participation recognition pipeline. So I skimmed to the last page where they offered us to use Starlens for $350 per month and to automate our participation recognition and getting the flow of all that. And that would cost an extra $1,100. And if that would have been accepted, more discussions would have started of when can they make a work group so that we could also participate or get or like have a stand-up way of understanding how long it would take for them to do the proposal or finish up the development. And in addition, we quickly talked about read-I license, which is going to be under ambassador email. And that Peter will set it up and he will be reimbursed it in AGIX plus 20% every month. And also there was a discussion on Mindplex content translation, but that we will look future how to commission that one. Thanks for staying in this call, participating, giving your thoughts and carrying over the complex discussions of how to manage our rewards in an effective way.
Thank you, Tiva.
Thanks a lot, you.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
See you on the next call.